You're watching Experience Comic Culture and Sales, streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Dan Wickline Show. Today, I'm going to stare longingly into the camera like a Psycho Circus version of Romper Room. Then we'll have some MCU updates and a primer for Ironheart. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, Dan Wickline Show, getting rolling here. Got a couple bits of news to cover, and then we will jump into a primer for the upcoming Ironheart series, because that's finally getting some motion going forward. And I realized that I didn't really know that much about the character, so I spent some time looking it up, thought I should write this down and tell you people. So, it wasn't supposed to be creepy. Yeah, no, that wasn't a Psycho Circus version of Romper Room. No, that wasn't supposed to be creepy. All right, so first thing we got to start with is the sad news today. It's the passing of Gilbert Gottfried. Gilbert was just of such a unique comedian, voice talent, and just he had so much fun with the stuff he did. He passed away today at the age of 67 after a long illness, and that is just so many comedians we've lost recently, with Louis Anderson and Bob Saget, and it's just getting ridiculous. But I know up on Facebook, people are posting a picture of the three of them together. Saget was taking a selfie of all three of them, and now they're all gone. Just kind of mind-blowing. Gilbert, of course, was the voice of the parrot in Aladdin. He was the voice of the Affleck duck or goose for a long time. And just, was a funny guy. He once did a dramatic reading of the 50 Shades of Grey books in his voice, which may have been one of the most disturbing things ever on YouTube. Yeah, so my condolences to his family, his friends, those that love him, and he will be missed. Just so many of the laughs are being taken away. So, all right, we're going to go on into, we got a little bit of news from a unique place. Anthony Mackie was being interviewed about his upcoming Twisted Metal project, and they asked when if they've started shooting Captain America 4 yet. And that's another one that some of these MCU projects, so many get announced that you forget about some of them. The shiny object's the one that gets the attention. Captain America 4 was mentioned after Falcon and Winter Soldier aired about this time last year. Well, now they're finally getting things moving. According to Mackie, he told Extra TV that he should be starting on Captain America 4 in the next couple of weeks, and that he's getting back into MCU shape by eating a ton of vegetables and chicken breasts. So hopefully we'll start getting some news on it. They'll start telling us a little bit more about, Captain America 4, whether the plot's going to be, do we ever find out if Steve's on the moon? By the way, the idea that Captain America is on the moon, I wonder if that has anything to do with the writers being fans of Eddie Izzard. Because if you're an Eddie Izzard fan, you might know that, or if you've watched some of his specials and stuff, one of them, he does a bit about lying. He says, you always lie to your parents. You never admit anything. And you tell them, did you do this? And you go, no, it wasn't me. I was dead at the time. I was on the moon with Steve. And he says, I was on the moon with Steve. And now we're talking about Steve being on the moon. Could just be a huge coincidence, or could somebody have watched that comedy special as many times as I did? and it gets stuck in your head forever and ever and ever. Yeah, this is going to be a weird show today. You can tell already, can't you? All right, let's go ahead and talk Ironheart. We're going to get into this. This is a real interesting character. As I started digging into it, she's only been around, depends on how you look at the creation date, but she's either been around 5 or 6 years, depending on whether you're talking the Riri Williams part of her or the Ironheart version, because she was name dropped first, then appeared in her regular civilian ID, and then eventually took on the name Ironheart. So it really depends, but I look at this, and there's a ton of Marvel projects going in the works right now. Miss Marvel, She-Hulk, Moon Knight, Armor Wars, Secret Invasion, Loki Season 2, and those are all headed to Disney+. Plus, then you got like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Thor Love and Thunder, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, and the Marvels, and those are all headed to theaters. We're now talking about Captain America 4 today, where nobody had been talking about that for a while, and every once in a while, you get news on a project that suddenly puts it back into the conversation. And it starts to, get a little steam again. And that happened yesterday. The news was that Sam Bailey and Angela Barnes have been tapped to direct the Ironheart series, and that Ryan Coogler from Black Panther, the director of Black Panther, and his Proximity banner were joining as producers on the series. Now, this is a project that's been in the works since it was announced at the infamous or famous Investors Day meeting back in December of 2020. Dominic Thorne was already cast as Riri Williams, and she's a genius inventor from MIT who creates her own suit of armor that basically rivals that of Iron Man. She's like the young female African-American version of Iron Man. Other casting, Anthony Ramos from Hamilton, and then was the lead in The Heights. He's recently signed on to the series. No idea what he's going to play yet. But, there's some interesting characters. It really depends on which part of her life they're looking at. So maybe he's another costumed hero from the Champions. Maybe he's one of the bad guys from the 10 Rings. And will they be the 10 Rings? But we'll get all into that. Two other people cast for undisclosed roles are Lyric Ross and Harper Anthony. And they've tapped Tanaka Hodge as the head writer of the series. Now, she will also serve as an executive producer along with Ryan Coogler, Zinzi Coogler, Sev Ohanian from Proximity, and then Kevin Feige, Louis D'Esposito, Victoria Alonso, Brad Winderbaum, and Zoe Nagelhout are all from Marvel. So that's your executive producer crew. Now, if you're not familiar with the directors on this show, Bailey is the co-creator of the Emmy-nominated Brown Girls and the creator of You're So Talented. She was a producer and director on the final season of Netflix Dear White People, and she was a director on the previous season. Bailey also directed Powder Keg's South by Southwest pick East of La Brea. And then Barnes, she led the upcoming season 4 of Atlanta. She helmed that season. And she also worked on episodes of Mythic Quest and Blind Spotting. Now, as for Hodge, the writer, she's really interesting because she's a poet, a playwright, a screenwriter, an actress, just kind of all super talented. And prior to this, she worked on the Amazing Stories series and Snowpiercer. So she comes from a pretty interesting background to bring into this as well. Now, Dominic Thorne, the actress, now she's kind of new to acting. but has had some interesting roles. She was in If Beale Street Could Talk and Judas and the Black Messiah. Now, Thorne worked with 2 other MCU vets in those films. In Beale Street, she was paired with Tiona Paris, who went on to play Miss Marvel, or not Miss Marvel, Monica Rambeau in WandaVision, and then is supposed to be back for the Marvels. And then she also worked with Daniel Kaluuya in Judas and the Black Messiah, and of course he was in Black Panther. Now, she won't be debuting in Ironheart. She'll actually be making her MCU debut in Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which kind of explains why Coogler is now involved with the producing of the Ironheart series, is that they've kind of taken this character who was originally under the Iron Man legacy and kind of moving her into the Black Panther family. So we'll see how that works out. But so Coogler is producing, and this is also his production company, Proximity, signed an overall deal with Disney back in February of 2021. So that's where we're at on the actual project. Now, if you don't know much about Ironheart, we'll do a quick primer on her. Now, she's a creation of Brian Michael Bendis and artist Mike Deodato. And she first appeared as Riri Williams in Invincible Iron Man Volume 3, Number 7 in March 2016. But she was sort of name-dropped in the first issue of that volume. Tony Stark is mentioning in either he's talking to himself, but he mentions that a 13-year-old girl or 15-year-old girl basically built herself a suit of armor by re-engineering his work. So she's referred to in that way, not by name, but by deed, and then would appear in Invincible Iron Man Volume 3, Number 7. Now, it would be almost a year later in Invincible Iron Man Volume 4, Number 3, in January of 2017, so about 10 months later, that she debuted as Ironheart. Now, the character grew up in the South Shore neighborhood of Chicago, Illinois, with her sister Sharon, mother Ronnie, and stepfather, as her own father is said to have died shortly after she was born. Now, at the age of 5, she was demonstrating behavioral problems, which led to her being taken to a child psychiatrist. Well, doing some tests and stuff like that, the psychologist realized that Riri was a super genius, like off the charts level genius. And I believe the tests were called the Wile E. Coyote tests. Now, it was recommended that she be placed into a special care to foster her abilities and provide the emotional support she would need for being that intelligent at that age. You know, when you're that smart, kids can be horrible to somebody that smart, you know, just like any kind of difference, whether it's your glasses, you're overweight, you got a speech impediment, anything, whether it's even a positive thing like being really intelligent, kids separate you at that age for being different and pick on you. And that, of course, is what happened. And she, went to this special class. Now, her intelligence caused her to become kind of introverted. She retreated into her own mind. And at 10, she actually met her only real friend, which was Natalie Washington. When Natalie noticed that Riri was outside working on an invention and the garage door was open. So she was in the garage, door was open. Natalie's walking by, sees it, goes on in, just introduces herself. And we find out that Riri is working on something that she thinks an invention that she thinks will help superheroes in the future. Now, they became friends. And about a year later, she got her scholarship to MIT. So Riri started at MIT at the age of 11. But at the age of 13, her family and Natalie's family got together at Marquette Park and were having just a celebration, and they got caught in a drive-by. Riri was unhurt, but both Riri's stepfather and Natalie were killed by stray bullets. Now, this really kind of informed the character going in the future. It reminds me a lot of the MCU Iron Man and his whole armor around the world, because, armor would have saved Natalie. Armor would have saved her stepfather. So her becoming obsessed with armor and Iron Man's armor and Iron Man's technology makes a lot of sense at this point. Having kind of lived through this tragedy at age 13, already having lost a father around her birth, to lose her stepfather, who's the only person she's known as a father, her best friend, her only friend. This really imprints on Riri going forward. Now, again, she kind of loses herself in her work and challenges herself by trying to reverse engineer the technology from an outdated Iron Man armor. Now, I'm not sure where she got it from, but she gets a hold of this older piece of the armor, the Model 41. Now, I know in the MCU, you can go through and pretty much figure out which suit of armor is which mark, because, they keep track of that. I don't know if they're as good about that in the comics, so I'm not sure which Model 41 it was, but it would be interesting if they do that, and maybe the piece she gets comes from Iron Man 3 when he does the house party protocol and destroys all the armor. Maybe she gets a hold of a stray piece of that armor, or it just, ends up out there on the market and stuff. And that's how she kind of reverse engineers it. Reverse engineers it. But now this turned into kind of a secret project, because when she started off, she really just wanted to figure out the tech, to figure out how it worked. But as she got more and more into it, she decided to make her own prototype armor. And she did it by kind of pilfering things from other labs at MIT. So she would just take things from here and there, and then eventually security kind of figured out what was going on and tracked her down. But before they could catch her, she put on the suit and flew away. So that was her great escape from that, and her first time flying in the suit was self-preservation. Now, she would go out and test the suit, flying it around, kind of figuring out what it could do, and she happened upon 2 escaped convicts that were speeding away in a truck. Now, she was able to stop the truck. She landed it, flipped it over, and stopped the prisoners, but in doing so, it damaged the instructional integrity of her suit, and she returned home to work on it. Now, this, of course, made the news. She found out, and of course, it got to Tony Stark, who decided to visit her. Now, Tony could have been angry, could have been a lot of things, but what he ended up doing was kind of endorsing her in the idea of her becoming a superhero. This would lead to her, even though it was against her mother's wishes, to repair her suit, and she eventually would take on the name of, or she would assist Tony later on during the Second Civil War that pitted Tony against Captain Marvel, unlike the first one, which was Captain America. But Tony was injured during the battle, ended up in a coma. Now, Riri decided to continue the legacy of Iron Man, made herself an AI that was actually a duplicate of Stark and a new improved suit of armor, and took on the name of Ironheart. All right. At this point, we're going to take a break. We will come back and we'll dig more into Ironheart right after this.
Thanks for tuning into The Experience. Help us out and hit subscribe over on YouTube and click the bell when you do. Need some help? Scan the QR code in the bottom corner. Did you know that every Experience show, including some exclusive content, streams on Twitch? Check it out, twitch.tv/the_EXP. Or just scan that QR code.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dan Wickline Show. We are talking about the character of Ironheart. But before we get back into our primer on the character, I announced last week that I'm going to be doing a pick of the week, a comic that I think that is really good, that ties into things going on pop culture wise, and that I really like and I own. So what I did was I bought a frame for it, and it's still the same comic as last week because I haven't switched yet, but this is Moon Knight #1, written by Jed MacKay, art by Carcoli, and the cover here, this is Gerardo Zaffino, and this was a variant cover to the new series that launched. I think number 10 came out last week, so it's not that far back, but this is the first issue. Now, I'm going to get a nail and hang this up like right about there, so we'll see the pick of the week and I'll be able to point it out. But if you are interested in getting this particular book, you can go to your local comic shop and ask for it. If you don't know where your local comic shop is, then check out comicshoplocator.com, put in your zip code. It'll take you to wherever the local shop is. Now, if you're like me, you don't really have a really close local shop, thanks to Frankensons. The Frankenson comic thing that goes here kind of kills anybody opening a shop in the general area. But it's only opened 2 days a week and is not really convenient for me to get to. So what I did was I ordered mine off of dynamicforces.com, where they carry a lot of the different Moon Knight covers, the variant covers. There's this one. There's the John Romita Jr. cover. They also have this CGC graded, if that's your thing. So check out dynamicforces.com for the Gerardo Zaffino cover for Moon Knight #1. And this will be hanging up here. And it's I got one of those quick change covers or frames. So I can switch it out and put up new books all the time. So we'll be changing it up as we go, but today it's still Moon Knight because Moon Knight's a great series, and the new episode drops midnight tonight here in LA, 3 a.m. if you're on the East Coast, and I feel sorry for you because I'm happy to see it at midnight, but looking forward to the next Moon Knight. I was so surprised with where they went with this last one that I'm really kind of curious to see what's going to happen next. All right, so let's get back into the history of Ironheart, Riri Williams. Now that they've got directors, they've got the head writer, they've got the producing crew, This is, and this is going to be moving forward pretty quickly if it hasn't already started. Well, now, early production, locations, all that stuff has to be done. But so we left off Tony Stark in a coma. Riri makes an AI that is a duplicate of Tony Stark. So basically, her Jarvis is Tony Stark. Talks to her and stuff like that. She's got a new improved suit. Now, doing this, she quickly makes a name for herself. But the problem is that, and it becomes a problem later, she's known to be in the suit. It's the same thing with Iron Man. It's known that Riri Williams is Ironheart. So, and she's building up the popularity. She's teaming up with different people. And oftentimes she's taken on Iron Man's old foes. She even teams up with Rescue, who is Pepper Potts. We get to see her armor in Endgame at the very end, but it's used more in the comics. MIT comes along and offers her their resources, and that she could have her own lab. She's also allowed to use offered to use Stark's old lab, and she was invited to join a teenage superhero team called the Champions. Now, she doesn't officially join, but she does a lot with them. Also, she gets on the radar of S.H.I.E.L.D. that brings her in to invade Latveria? Yep. S.H.I.E.L.D. decides that sending in a teenage girl to take down a war criminal named Lucia von Bardas was a good idea. Now, Ironheart is able to defeat the terrorist, but she then declares herself the new ruler of Latveria, and then sits down with S.H.I.E.L.D. and signs a truce between the two of them. Then she abdicates the throne, but that's only after setting up for the country to have their first free and fair elections. Now, this is all fascinating because most of you know, some may not, Latveria was the home of Dr. Doom. So someone else had taken over Latveria with Doom's absence. She comes in and turns it, takes over. Riri comes in, turns it over, takes over, and makes it a democracy. Kind of interesting for Latveria. Not something I expected. But now from there, she had some pretty bizarre adventures. I mean, again, she's only been around 5 or 6 years, and she has this ton of strange things that she gets involved in. She and the Champions end up teaming up with Spider-Man and Black Widow to try and bring down Hydra when they're being led by a fascist doppelganger of Captain America and have pretty much started taking over the country. They become part of the resistance, and they're doing this through the Cosmic Cube. But this particular Cosmic Cube has a name, Kobik. And as a reward for defeating Hydra, Kobik decides he's going to have some fun and sends different members of the Champions to different time periods. Riri ended up in the distant future, where she got to hang out with a very different Tony Stark. This was Tony Stark's Sorcerer Supreme. And he inspired her to continue working on her own future. So she came back from it, already having a big chunk of her life inspired by Tony Stark, now inspired by a different version of Tony Stark to come back and really focus on where she's going in life. Later, it turns out that the modern day Tony Stark's body, his comatose body, he's still in a coma, has disappeared. And she goes through a lot of stuff to try to find it. One of the things is she joins a think tank that is started by Leonardo da Vinci. And the think tank is trying to create something to replace the now defunct SHIELD. But I got to tell you, SHIELD probably should be defunct for sending teenagers in to try to take over countries. Now, Tony's body eventually gets recovered, and he wakes up from his coma. And she officially ends up joining the champions at this point. And they go off into space to help Nova. And I think this is the younger Sam version, not the older Richard Rider version. But to save the Chitauri race from genocide. Now, you probably know the Chitauri as the bad aliens that were swarming all over in the first Avengers movie. Well, these are being run by Thanos as well. And for some reason, Riri thinks taking on Thanos by herself is a good idea. And Thanos disintegrates her armor. But he decides not to kill her because she did help save the Chitauri, which were Thanos' minions. So she helped the Chitauri against the Warbringer, and it was enough for Thanos to keep her alive. Just no armor now. So she's convinced by Miss Marvel to begin working on a new suit of armor, and she takes some of the Chitauri technology into account as well. So now she's kind of merging Tony Stark technology, her own creations, and the Chitauri technology into what this new suit is going to be. Later on, she was also present when Miles Morales discovered there had been a shooting at his high school. And while all the champions took it poorly, Riri was particularly upset, showing this morbid resignation to the inevitability of gun violence. She explained to another one of her teammates, Amadeus Cho, that it was at least some part of why she built the armor in the first place was what happened to Natalie and her stepfather. So again, it's kind of brought back just how much the drive-by shooting that killed them really kind of led her down the path to be a hero, but also to being what type of hero she is. Now, while she's with the champions, a few members of the team end up going missing. And it somehow is tied to Man-Thing. Not Swamp Thing, Man-Thing, Marvel's version. Stay with me. Now, Riri and the rest of the champions figure out where they are, and they enter this place called the Siege Parallel to get them back. Now, if Kyle's listening and he hasn't read this story, this may be the story for him, because this is an alternate reality that is kind of akin to Dungeons and Dragons, where each member of the team, as they go through into it, are turned into a fantasy archetype. Riri becomes a paladin named Lady Ironheart, and she was also the only member of the team that could remember her life back on Earth prior to coming through. So she has to go around and start getting the members back. First one she tracks down is Miles Morales, who is now a rogue going by the name of Shadow Spider. And she convinces him of the truth, and the two embark on saving their teammates. And, they go through and you learn what all the other ones turned into. Like Hulk, Amadeus Cho ends up being a barbarian. Some of them were pretty obvious. Some were more like warlocks, a little more obscure, but overall they were pretty cool. Now, once they were back in the real world, Riri eventually took up the MIT offer to have her own lab, and she began building a new AI, but based on her own brainwaves and memories. So this thing she created basically scanned and composited her thoughts. Well, when it was completed, it just took form. And to Riri's shock, it took the form of an aged up version of her best friend, Natalie. Now, again, she kind of got past that And it made sense that they would, that it would take the form of Natalie. But, of course, she had to come up with an acronym to justify calling the AI Natalie. So she went with the Neuro-Autonomous Technical Assistant and Laboratory Intelligence Entity. I would have just called her Nat and made it a lot easier, because that's a lot of words. So, yeah, that was a lot of words. Now, she would come into conflict a lot with a group of the 10 rings. Now, and she would take on various agents. They always seemed to have this overall thing they were going for. Well, she eventually discovers they're looking for the wellspring of power. And she figures if she can find it first, then maybe she can figure out what they're doing. She goes to get help, and she goes to Dr. Strange. Now, Strange is a little hesitant to help because he's seen kind of what more and more power has done to Tony Stark, and worries what the wellspring of power would do for someone as intelligent as Riri. But he eventually acquiesces and shows her where the wellspring is. And then she goes to Tony Stark to help her get there, because it's in Wakanda. Now, she goes to Wakanda and meets up with Shuri, who is also a super genius. And the initial meeting is rocky. They don't necessarily get along that great in the beginning, but eventually they go to the wellspring, or they go to the area, and they have to work together to stop an invasion of shadow creatures coming from the wellspring. And most of the time, like in comics, when two people fight together, they become friends. Well, they end up getting joined by a character named Silhouette and Okoye, who we all know from MCU as well. So the four of them go in they gain access to the wellspring, and they are confronted by the 10 rings, who are doing a ritual to try to open it. Now, among the agents that are there for 10 rings, there's Midnight's Fire, which is Silhouette's brother. There is Eclipse. There's Tomo. I'm not sure how to pronounce that one. And then there's this leader named Dune. Well, Dune turns out to be, in the amazing comic book and soap opera twist, Riri's long-dead father. The one that died when she was right after she was born. Turns out, nope, he's the bad guy. So, being that she's the daughter of Dune, it turns out that she has some standing in the 10 rings. And when they were captured, Riri decides to initiate a battle for the key of the wellspring, basically challenging Dune, being that she's his daughter. Now, in the fight, she uses some PIM particles that she had been gifted, and uses those PIM particles to help her get the key, but she ends up falling inside of the wellspring, where she gets these visions and has this epiphany that it reveals to her the truth of her father's disappearance, but it also kind of augments her powers and gives her enough powers that she is able to come out of the wellspring and take on the 10 rings and force them to retreat. Now, for their efforts, Ironheart and Silhouette receive the highest Wakanda honor, which is the Circlet of Bast, and Shuri lets Riri know that she will always have a place in Wakanda. Now, she would make trips back there occasionally. Wakanda was building a space program, and Riri went back to help with that. And also, when they got invaded at one point, she went back to help with that as well. So, now, we're going to go ahead and pause there. We're going to take another break, and then we will come back and finish our dive into the history of Riri Williams, a.k.a. Ironheart, right after this. Stay tuned.
Join the party. Head over to our link tree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.
This is The Experience.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hey there, hi there, ho there. You're as welcome as can be.
Hi, I'm Nancy McCann. Welcome to Friday Night Live on The Experience.
Welcome everybody, it's Fat Jack's Comic Crypt. Brendan, Al, Jason, hanging out.
There I am. Welcome back to Kicking It with Henry, folks. I am your host, Henry Copeland. It's great to be here with you guys.
So we are going to talk about books that are in stores this week.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Mishmash.
Hello, and welcome to the Black Comics Universe, presented by Peep Game Comics.
And you gotta love it that the first people in the minute to skim it are creators.
Up, everybody! Welcome to another Wednesday Warriors. My name is Joey Galvez, and this is my pal Ambrosia.
Hey, everybody! Welcome to Space Cadet.
Hey!
What's up?
Welcome, everyone, for another episode of I Must Ask You a Question.
Hi, everybody, welcome to Nerd News Now.
Hey, this is Rex. Welcome to Comic Collectibles.
Hey, hello, all you happy people. Welcome to the Dan Wickline Show.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is the crazy show that we do on Thursdays called What's in the Box?
What's in the box?
Comic culture and sales.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Dan Wickline Show. We're taking a deep dive into the history of Ironheart. Riri Williams, as the show has been, has its head writer and has its directors now, has producers. So we should be hearing some more casting news. We do know that Anthony Ramos is in it, Dominic Thorne, and a couple of, I've lost my notes. So, Lyric Ross, Harper Anthony, Tanaka Hodge is going to be the writer. Sam Bailey and Angela Barnes are going to be the directors. And Ryan Coogler from the Black Panther movies, his production company is coming in to work with Marvel Studios to put this whole thing together. We don't know how soon this will happen, when it'll take over, but it's going to start hanging. It's going to start happening soon. So let's before we get back into it, though, let me tell you. Usually after the show today is Black Comic Universe, but we're not having that today. But we will be having Minute to Skim It at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and then I will be back with Kyle and Jay, I believe. And we'll be doing What's in the Box. No, that's not our show. In Stores This Week. In Stores This Week, where we're going to be talking about the 40th anniversary of G.I. Joe, Real American Hero, which is an awesome comic if you are a fan of the old series. Shadow Man number 8, which wraps up that series with a great ending. Angel 4, Evil Ernie 5, a new series from Zach Kaplan called Breakout, and also The Wrong Earth, Fame and Fortune from Ahoy, we got a lot of great books we'll be talking about in just a little bit. That's at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. So come back for that. I will, Kyle will, Jay will, who's running the boards today. Hello, Jay. All right. Let's get back into our write-up. We've still got a bit to cover. Now, Riri would hang up her armor after the passage of this thing called the Underage Superhuman Welfare Act. This outlawed teenage vigilantism. And while maybe some of the heroes and some of the younger heroes did keep doing what they were doing, because Riri was known for being Ironheart, it would be obvious if she was out there doing heroic acts. And where maybe she wouldn't be afraid of the legal ramifications for herself, being a teenager, they would also come back to bite her mom for child endangerment and stuff like that. So she had to, kind of put the suit away. And this really kind of messed things up, but she also wanted to help her teammates. So she let her AI help. The problem was that one of the former teammates, Viv Vision, who's kind of a daughter to the Vision, was part of the team, but she disagreed with them still doing the stuff and basically ratted them out. And there was this organization called Cradle, which was an acronym that I don't really care about, but they were the ones enforcing that, and the team got together to try to figure out what they could do, along with Natalie, the AI, and Cradle showed up. The team ended up on the run, and eventually they came and tried to hide out at Riri's house that Viv also turned them on. And when Cradle got there, and so basically they're on the run for a long time, but they decided they couldn't keep doing that and turned around and stood their ground and went up against Cradle, took it head on, and basically they found out that Cradle and the law itself were being backed by Roxxon Corporation, which we all know is an evil corporation, and allegedly. And with they find that and make the knowledge public, and in doing so, Cradle got disbanded. There was no one left to enforce the law, and nobody else was trying because the law was being in the process of being repealed. So, now she's back in armor, but so there was this period where she had to give it up. Now, this is kind of a shortened recap of her adventures. And like I said earlier, this is pretty amazing for a character that's only been around about 5 or 6 years. She's worked with a lot. I mean, you look at most of the MCU heroes, and they've been around 30, 40, 50 years. I mean, you look at some of these characters that feel new, and they came out in the Darkhawk, started in the 80s or the 90s. I mean, they've all been around 20, 30 years. So newer ones like Miss Marvel and Riri Williams, getting that kind of mixed into the MCU is going to be kind of interesting. Now, something else to think about here is a lot of the Disney Plus shows have been introducing us to characters from the Young Avengers. Kate Bishop, Isaiah Bradley, Tommy and Billy Maximoff, Kid Loki, possibly a young Kang. I mean, Stature from the Ant-Man series. Well, Katie, what is her name? Anyway, so you end up with a lot of these events, but you've got Ironheart, who wasn't a member of the Young Avengers, but she was in the Champions with Kamala Khan, who's Miss Marvel, going to get her own series soon too. So maybe they're building both teams. We're going to get a Champions team and a Young Avengers team, or they're just going to kind of merge them into one, which I think is more likely. But there are some other potential champions on the horizon. They talked about doing a Nova series, and while it's supposed to be a Richard Rider series, there's always a chance that they'll bring in Sam. And there's always talk about Miles Morales making an MCU debut. So both of them were in the champions. And you got Amadeus Cho. If they're going to do the legacy pass on the Hulk, She-Hulk is one of them, but Amadeus Cho is another legacy character. So we could be seeing both champions and that. Now, Riri will be debuting in Black Panther Wakanda Forever and would be a good candidate to show up in Armor Wars as well. But neither series, Armor Wars or Ironheart, is that far along, so it's really kind of hard to tell which one's going to come out first. And they may end up just introducing Riri in Black Panther and do kind of like they did in the comics, give her a little time to be known for intelligence and all that other stuff, and then save her actually making her own armor and stuff until either the Armor Wars series or the Ironheart series, whichever comes first. That would make a lot of sense. It would also be kind of similar to the way they introduced Monica Rambeau. The first, she first appeared in Captain Marvel, and then they developed her as an adult. She was a kid in Captain Marvel. As an adult in WandaVision, she, we found her as an agent. We found out she had been snapped. And then she goes through the barrier and gets her powers. Now, from there, we're probably not going to get her into an actual costume and showing off her powers even more until the Marvels movie coming up, which is also going to have Miss Marvel in it and Captain Marvel. So I could see them doing something similar, which is really neat to me, because when they do this kind of stuff, it really makes the MCU feel big and cohesive, more than just a name drop here and this, that. When they kind of start a character over here and then do a little bit more with that character here, and then eventually, boom, they're a big character with powers and everything else, it really does feel like we're growing these things, like in the comics. It's a great way to mimic what comes from comics, and I like how they do that, and I think it's something unique to Marvel that I haven't really seen many other franchises kind of adopt. I mean, we've never seen like a young kid in a James Bond film that 5 movies later becomes a 00. Or, Star Wars, we didn't see Rey running around in a previous movie, just they could do it. I mean, there's a lot of characters and stuff they could suddenly make bigger, but I don't know. Nobody's really done it as well as the MCU, and I like what they do, and I can't wait to see what they're going to do with these new characters. But also, I hope they spend a little more time with the existing characters, because I'm not ready to move on from some of them. I still like Hawkeye, the Clint Barton Hawkeye. I still like Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner. And, I don't want to lose all these characters. We've lost, Robert Downey Jr. and Scarlett Johansson and Chris Evans. I don't want them all to go away. I like some of the original characters. And as long as Chris Hemsworth sticks around and Mark Ruffalo and that, we don't need to replace all of them. You're talking about characters that have been around since the 60s. And, we don't need to replace, there was like 40, 50 years or even more on some of these characters before a replacement ever came along. So let's do a little bit more stories with them. So go ahead and bring in the new people. Let's mix and match, but let's keep some of the old ones. Let's not just clear the slate and move on. All right. So that is my deep dive into Riri Williams and the character of Ironheart. I didn't know much about the character. I haven't had a chance to read too much about her, so I had to do my research for this, but she's really an interesting character to me. The bringing in the drive-by shooting and that as kind of a defining factor for the character, makes her a real modern feel to the character, that she's dealing with, everyday issues. Even though you have a super genius character, they tend to be very hard to personalize, to identify with. By giving her this tragic past and making it something very realistic, it allows readers to connect to her in a way that just making her a super genius wouldn't. You do see that with detectives. Every main detective has a flaw. Sherlock Holmes is super intelligent, okay, but he gets so bored that he has to do drugs, and he can't handle that. He can't handle people in power, but the everyday person he'll chat with. These are things to make him more relatable to the reader. Poirot's the same thing. His OCD and fastidiousness is to humanize him. And down the line, you get that with, like I said, anytime somebody makes a super genius character, they give them like a sidekick and a flaw to make them more relatable to the audience. So with Riri, they did that by giving her this tragic past, keeping her young, giving her real life experiences to go along with this super intelligence. She's not just living in a bubble or an iron suit. She's living life. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with this character. Like I said, I don't know much about her, so it's going to be interesting when the series comes up, because there's kind of a fresh slate in a lot of people's minds. And I like that. And I think it's working well with Moon Knight. Hopefully it'll work well with Riri as well, too. All right, guys. That is going to wrap it up for today. Remember to stick around at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern for Minute to Skim It with Miss Jen as she goes over some of the books coming out this week. And then Kyle, myself, and Jay, our producer today, will be doing, why do I keep forgetting the name of In-Stores this week? We've been doing it for a freaking year now. You think I would remember it. But we're going to be doing In-Stores this week. A lot of great books coming out this week. Shadow Man, loving the Shadow Man series. Just picked up the trade of the first set of issues. So even though I'd already read them, I'm loving Shadow Man. You guys definitely should be checking out this series. It wraps up. It's going to launch a new Shadow War coming up, so you'll want to stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for tuning in. I will be back tomorrow. I don't know what the topic's going to be, but I'll figure it out. Stick around. See you soon. Good night, everybody.
Join the party. Head over to our Linktree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.